In today's video, we're going to be talking about how to shoot something so it looks like it's been shot with multiple cameras. But really, you only have one, because you're not rich. Yeah, let's say you're vlogging, let's say you're doing something. Let's say I'm doing a scene where I walk from my van into my yard, up my pathway to my door, open my door and come in the house. Well, if you're just vlogging it normally, like you're just staring down the barrel of your camera while you walk all the way to your front door and down the pathway, sure, you can do that while you're talking. But if you want to spice it up a little bit, you can do it as if you're shooting it from multiple angles. And it might look something like this. And that's what it might look like. Now, that whole thing in post is gonna end up being 10-15 seconds maybe. In reality, that took about 10 minutes to shoot. Now let's go over a couple of things that I like to keep in mind when it comes to shooting these sequences to make them look as good as possible. Tip number one, don't use dogs or babies because they screw up the continuity. First off, I apologize about the lighting. I'm just way too lazy to set up my actual light. Is that better? Does that lighting look better? Number one, continuity. Man, film geeks will pick your shit apart if you have continuity errors, so make sure that you plan things out. You'll notice that in that little sequence I did a couple of things that you might have looked right past, but in reality they were super important. I'm sweating like Mike Tyson at a spelling bee right now. A good example of this is when I closed the gate behind me. I did this little thing where I hung my arm out for a couple of seconds. That was intentional because I wanted that to be a defining characteristic of that movement and therefore use that action to sell the sequence itself. Another thing that I was super aware of is when I dropped my keys. What hand am I picking it up with? What hand am I dropping it with? I always keep my keys in my right pocket, so it was drop with the right, pick up with the left. All the way down to when I approach the door, what hand is on the doorknob, what hand is on the key. All that kind of stuff is super important when shooting one of these sequences, because if you go from what would have been camera A to camera B and there's something wrong with that, people are going to pick that up and it doesn't look as good. Now there's two ways to shoot a sequence like that. You can either set your camera up and go through the entire motion, right? Getting out of the van, going to the house, dropping the keys, picking them back up, getting to the door. Now that sequence is a little too complicated to set the camera up once and run through the entire scene, but if you look at the film that I posted last Friday, it was a short film on why I make these videos. There was an opening sequence in that film that I'll show right now, and in that situation I could have done it one of two ways. I could have ran through the entire thing start to finish, or I did what I actually did, which ended up working out kind of well. You'll notice that when I move the camera, I'm writing a different word every time, and I actually did that. I'd set up the camera, I would write a word, I'd set up the camera in a different location, I'd write another word, I'd set up the camera in a different location. And what ended up happening was a really cool continuity thing happened where I actually misspelled the word videos. That wouldn't have happened had I have ran through the whole thing unless I had it planned. So planning is super important. Like I said before, it's the little things that sell the whole sequence, right? A movement of the hand, a drop of the keys, where your foot, all the way down to like where I dropped my keys was important. I wanted to make sure I hit a mark that was about 1 foot in front of that little tuft of grass that went through my walkway, because that's where I dropped it in the original shot. Another thing to keep in mind when you're doing stuff like this to make sure it's as good as possible is to review your clips. Make sure that once you capture what you want to capture, you look back on it, you make sure that it's exactly what you wanted. When I review my clips, I'm looking for two main things. Number one, was the framing correct? Was I where I wanted to be in the shot? Was I positioned properly? Did I have enough headroom? If I needed to crop in or add like a digital slide to make it look a little better, can I do that? The other thing I'm checking for is focus. Now I'm using manual focus, I'm using autofocus right now, but when I shoot stuff like that, it's almost always in manual focus to make sure I don't have to worry about any focus breathing while I'm doing the scene itself. Now let's take the sequence that I've shot so far, let's bring it into our editing software, and let's talk a little bit about the editing. On Final Cut, the Option square bracket keys allow you to ripple cut one way or the other. So that's basically what I'll be doing for the first little bit. Is I have my thumb on the Option key, middle finger on the left square bracket, ring finger, on the right square bracket, and I'm basically just going to be going through it just like this, just cutting away, specifically cutting away the walking out to the location shots, or setting it up, or just walking away shots kind of thing. Here's a bunch of fun walking while I didn't realize the camera was on, I guess. So got another entrance shot here. So you see how I mentioned that earlier, that little arm swing that I said that I do? I did it very intentionally, and that's one of the reasons why, is so I can set it up like that. So here we see the key reach in the pocket, drop the keys, oh no, pick it up with the left hand and keep going, right? And as I kind of go back and forth, so here's the close-up of the keys being dropped. I wasn't joking when I said don't shoot with animals, right? Because here you clearly see Rocky's in the background, and then no Rocky. Continuity error, see? But when I actually post this, if I were to actually post it as a film, I'd say, spot the continuity error, win a prize. All right, let's get rid of most of that stuff on that side. And then I'm going to, so about right here when I start moving forward, so there's my first step, edit that, and I'll let it run. Awesome. And then what I'll normally do is I'll come back to the clip before, press B for my blade tool, and as a point of reference, the Q and the W in Premiere Pro does the same thing, and the C is the cut tool, same as the blade tool. So then go back to this little sequence. So, whoop, keys drop there, blade, insert. So now we have a cool little cut. So you see how like there's a lot of spare time between those clips. So I'm actually going to bring this one out a little bit. Cut it there. Cut it there. Now it's got a little bit more of a flow to it. And then I'll cut it when my left hand is on it there. And then I'll cut it here because it's a little bit more in line with what I want. Whoops. Pick it up. There we go. Off to the races. Cut that down. And here's another one where I'm going to go in my pocket and actually show me pulling my keys out. So, cut it there. Whoa. Clumsy me. So here, so that's where I do this. Right there is when I go in my pocket, so I cut there. Press A to get my selection tool back. Now I can tell that story with a little bit more depth. So in that shot there, I actually pulled the keys right out and dropped it right away, which is I shouldn't have done that. Right? So now I have to do a little bit of finicking. But what I can do is that, cut there, back to here. Oh, there's the drop. So now it looks a little bit more smooth. In the pocket, out, drop, pick it up. Cool. And then we go to this kind of like a little accoutrement type shot where I'm just fiddling with my keys, getting ready to throw them in the door. I didn't like that take, so I did it again. Because I wanted to see my hands. Good stuff. So now we have this little walk up the stairs, insert into the door, switch hands, and that's where I switch hands, so I'm going to cut there. Boom. Now we go inside. So we look for where that... That's the only thing about working in a situation like that where there's a massive exposure change. Like in a perfect world, if I was doing this on an actual shoot, I'd have a giant diffuser outside the door to drop the exposure of outside. A handful of stops, but just not doing that. So, cut there, pop the door open, and you want to try and cut on the action here. So I was already pushing the door, so I almost want to start with it cracked because it feels more flowy, like so. And there's where the key drop was, and then we go to a close-up of the key drop. And then you'll see in this next little frame, I have my hand outstretched. Even though the keys have already been dropped, I had my hand outstretched to signify that I had just dropped the keys. And that's what it might look like. That's the editing process.